Actually, I've got a short story that's again both historical and out of my personal room. One of the things that Gay and I are involved with is an exchange between Schenectady and our sister city in the Netherlands, and we just finished hosting 15 folks from the Netherlands in September, and we were there a year ago for the second time as part of the exchange. And these exchanges are wonderful in that you get to know people. So you have a personal relationship with a town that is a very important part of our history, since Nijkerk is the town that Schenectady's founder came from, Aaron Van Curler, and his uncle was Kilian Van Rensselaer, who was one of the founders of the Dutch West India Trading Company, a diamond merchant, and he owned most of upstate New York at one point in time, because Van Curler was his manager of his colony. So we've been going back and forth, and when you read history, when you study history, you get some of the story, but sometimes you need a little bit more than that. And when you visit a place, you get a sense of the people and the situation. Now, one of our fellow Schenectady Nijkerkers is named Van Calhoun, and his mother was a Van Tassel, and they had a farm, and actually Van now lives back on the farm in Chatham in Columbia County. And he lives on land that his ancestors got as a grant for fighting in the Revolution. So that's the history, the connection there. And when the Nijkerkers were here the last time, he hosted a party at the farm. And one of the leaders of the Nijkerk Exchange got to talking about his family, the Van Tassels. And he said, well, you know about Van Tassel Island. And he says, well, that's where they're from. And Tassel was a place where people, it's known for its fair wind and its fresh water. And I heard this in passing, but it just went by me. History sometimes just goes by you. So we're on our way to Nijkerk, and we arrive, and there's a big potluck supper, and everybody's running around. And our host was Hoest ter Scheert, who was the part of the conversation about Tassel Island, and he's a sailor. He was a single-handed Nostar racer who actually was the first person to get to this country to start the exchange 25 years ago. And he comes up to where Van and his wife Sue are sitting, and he places a pile of paper. And he says, this is the history of the Van Tassel family on Tassel Island. And I think it would be fun if we all went there together on Saturday. And it was in English. And he had done some research. And so we don't know where we're going. So Saturday comes and we get in the car and we start to drive across Holland with the big super windmills making electricity. And we get to the end of the water and we get on a ferry and we go out to a barrier island that is Tassel Island. It's one of those barrier islands. And as we get off the ferry and we get to the little village, we get out of the car and I'm about to lose my hat. And I begin to get some sense of what fair wind is. So I make a comment to that, and who says to me, he says, oh no, but let's look which way the wind is blowing. Well, it's blowing right out of the west. Uh-huh. So here's the story of the whole Dutch advance in the world, internationally and through trade. When you sailed out of Amsterdam Harbor, out of the Rhine River, or out of the Zuider Zee, you sailed right into a headwind. And what you then did was you parked your boat, your ship, behind an island, behind Tassel Island, and you waited for the wind to shift just enough so that you could sail with a little bit of the wind on your quarter, rather than having to beat that heavy boat all the way out. Now, it could take weeks for the wind to shift. So the fair wind you're waiting for required more fresh water, because if you were sailing between there and the New World or Indonesia, you needed to top off your water tanks and your provisions. So the Tassel Islanders got rich selling water and provisions to the West Indiamen while they were waiting for the wind to change. Now, isn't that something? When you read the history of the Dutch exploration and all their establishment of New Amsterdam and Jakarta and places around the world, you would never think that to actually start the trip, they sailed into a headwind, and they had to wait for the fair wind and the fresh water of a little sandy spit of land that sticks out into the North Sea. So history lives in many different ways in the very winds that curl our hair and take our hats off our head. And the next time you're listening to the wind blow in the trees, be remembered of the stories that are traveling by you, just like that. A fair wind, fresh water, story of going to Tessel Island.